The Ghost Men of Taivarua. Written and read by Jim Bentley. Ten faceless ghost men entered the village during the night's darkest phase. They were tall, dark, and hooded. Flowing black robes covered their entire bodies. Crude sandals padded the group's shuffling footsteps. The men, women, and children of Mu'usu village quivered behind closed doors in absolute fear. They peeped at the awesome images through cracks in the thatched walls of their homes. The only sound that could be heard above the ghost men's movements was the high-pitched screeching of crickets, chirping in unison from within the surrounding jungle. The eerie ghost men moved slowly and deliberately towards the offering of foodstuff, piled in the village center. In woven coconut leaf baskets, there were large plaited parcels of smoked deep-sea fish and giant yams from the village storehouse. The villagers caught their breath when the tall ghost men stopped to inspect the bounty. All hoped that the quantity met the pleasure of the threatening intruders. Carrying the strong baskets between them, the ghostly terrorists continued their slow amble through the village and disappeared into the thick foliage of the night jungle. The Mu'usu village elders came out of their hiding places to discuss the event and to reassure each other that danger had passed. For many years, the Mu'usu village people had been threatened into providing large quantities of fish and yams once each month to the ghost men of Taivarua Island. Located in the isolated inner Pacific, Taivarua is a moderately large volcanic landmass supporting about 50 village communities. The Taivaruans are generally peace-loving and inhabit the rich, fertile coastal areas. However, deep in the jungle, near the center of the island, live a group of Taivaruans who are violent and hostile. They are the families of former witch doctors and medicine men, exiled from their home villages because of evil witchcraft and associated devious activities. Referred to as the dry law ghost people, these inner jungle men and women are feared for their occult powers of voodoo and black magic. The dry law are known for their evil spells, which can kill their enemies or any other person they choose to kill. The villagers believe that dry law spells can have awful consequences. They can induce terrible mental illness, pain, and suffering, and serious bad luck. They can make a person fall deeply in love with someone they wouldn't normally associate with. Luring away another man's wife is simple under a dry law ghostman's black magic spell. Similarly, another woman's husband can be strongly attracted to a dry law ghost woman. Because of very difficult living conditions in the center of Taivarua Island, the dry law decided to live off the coastal people. The villages near the sea have access to marine resources and are productive gardeners. Chiefs receive a message each month, relayed to the village medicine man or woman through the dry law network. The dark, mysterious system is an effective means of inter-village communication. The terror message conveys to the village chief and elders the type of foodstuff the dry law ghost people demand. Under threat of horrific illness, plague, or death, the village chiefs and the people comply without question. The terrorist system was put in place several decades ago and was never challenged by the extremely intimidated, superstitious Taivarua leaders and citizenry. Coast dwellers have observed the dry law ghost people conducting devil worship ceremonies at their jungle villages during full moon. The cult activities include the killing and offering of animals and dripping entrails to an evil deity. This is followed by community orgies, the drinking of blood from warm offal, and the consumption of kava and jungle alcohol in large quantities. Tales of these rituals frightened the coastal Taivaruans immensely. During the long period of occult influence, the Mu'usu village citizens experienced threats to their lifestyle and well-being from other directions. Global warming, sea level rise, and unusual variations in climate. In recent years, the villagers had to evacuate the convenient, fertile, flat coastal gardening sites because of super high spring tides. They moved their plantations inland. In addition, many home sites were abandoned. People built new houses on higher ground to accommodate the ever-rising monthly spring tides. The persistent seawater ruined all edible plant life in its path. Sea salt rendered the land infertile for vegetable growing. The inland gardening sites were sufficiently fertile, but were not problem-free. They brought great stress to the Mu'usu villagers because of proximity to the island's center, the home of the dreaded dry law ghost people. The chiefs arranged for their village medicine men and women to train a group of young men in the occult arts and crafts to counteract the power of the dry law witch doctors. The hesitant youthful occult graduates accompanied the gardeners to the plantations as a form of psychological protection. On occasion, a dry law person was seen to wander into the vicinity of a Mu'usu plantation site. The young witch doctors eagerly chased the dry law away, giving credence to the chief's witchcraft training scheme. The gardeners were pleased, and stories of successful dry law skirmishes abound. In addition to coping with the dangers of sea level rise, the Mu'usu villagers had to learn to catch fish in the deep open sea. Under normal conditions, small fish in sufficient numbers were available around the barrier or shoreline reefs. But coral bleaching caused by global industrial pollution increased atmospheric carbon dioxide and sea acid levels. All forms of marine life around reefs were adversely affected. Reef fish, crustaceans, and mollusk stocks depleted. Large areas of coral reef died or suffered from excessive bleaching. The Taivaruans had to move their fishing activities to deeper water and learn new methods of catching large migratory ocean species such as tuna, marlin, and wahoo. This necessitated the use of outrigger canoes, which, because of their small size, involved elements of risk. The craft were prone to capsizing in strong wind and rough seas, and to attack when fishermen pulled in a fish pursued by a hungry shark. On occasion, fishermen did not return from deep-sea excursions. Outrigger canoes required enlargement. To counteract the loss of food, through the destruction of gardens by cyclonic weather conditions or long dry spells, the villagers increased yam house storage. This vital commodity is the only root vegetable which can be stored for long periods and serves as the ideal standby food. With lengthening hot, dry seasons, it is important for gardeners to increase yam yields during favorable weather. These complexities kept the Mu'usu villagers busy, but lifestyle was adversely compounded by the selfish, lazy, abusive, terrorist, dry law ghost people of the interior. The Mu'usu village leader, Chief Waikata, pondered his people's unenviable situation. With his elders, he discussed possible solutions to the problems presented by the dry law. These terrorists have been allowed to operate illegally for far too long. Solutions were elusive. Only one suggestion came from a village council member: increase the training of Mu'usu villagers in the occult arts and processes. Fight harder against the black magic and voodoo spells of the dry law ghost people. This was discussed in detail and discarded. The method would mean turning the Mu'usu people into terror specialists like the dry law. The councillors were in a quandary over their next line of action. The solution to the ghost people problems came in the form of Chief Waikata's son, Mosesa. He had been attending the regional university in Fiji. After 2 years without a holiday, he finally had sufficient funding to return home for the Christmas break. Mosesa was warmly welcomed to his home. The villagers admired their 20-year-old future chief, who became the first Taivaruan to gain entry to a university degree program. After the traditional welcoming ceremony and a sumptuous feast, Mosesa noticed a distant sadness in the eyes of the elders, his family, and friends. At the opportune moment, he requested an explanation from his aging chiefly father. "Before you left for the university," said Chief Waikata, "the demands by the dry law ghost men were relatively small. Now their requirements are very large and have become a burden to our people and resources. We need to do something about these evil activities, but we don't know how to effectively fight the overwhelming threat of sorcery and black magic." Chief Waikata briefed the young Mosesa on the terror events involving the dry law ghost people over the last 2 years. Mosesa was angered and terribly disappointed. His people did not see that the occult threats of the dry law clans were pure extortion. Mosesa requested his father's permission to deal with the dry law men. This included the use of force, but not killing the enemy. Chief Waikata agreed and called his council together to confirm the decision. While away at university, Mosesa realized that witch doctors and sorcerers are bold extortionists who prey on the superstitious village people. He called together the young men of the village to formulate a counteraction plan for the next dry law ghostman's visit. Mosesa had 4 days to prepare his youthful contingent for the encounter. On the 4th day, the Mu'usu villagers prepared and deposited the food demanded by the dry law. It was close to midnight when the ghost men arrived at the Mu'usu village entrance. They confidently ambled in their usual fashion towards the village center and the large baskets of yam and smoked deep-sea fish. The Drylaw ghost men's faces were hidden in the shade of the hoods they wore. Their bodies were completely covered by long black robes. There were 15 in all. From their indoor hiding places, the citizens of Mousu watched with more fear than ever. The chief and his councillors prayed solemnly and silently that Mosesa's plan would be successful. Negative thought vibrations radiated across the village. The ghost men continued their shuffling walk to the generous mound of foodstuff. They encircled the pile of baskets. Chief Waikata and his villagers held their breath momentarily, with eyes glued to the intimidating moonlit scene. Without warning, Mosesa and his group of male Mousu youth appeared from nowhere. They surrounded the ghost men. The Drylaw had never experienced resistance before and were not prepared for a confrontation. The youth of Mousu beat the ghost men about the legs with solid mangrove poles. The surprised ghost men fell to the ground, yelling. All of the terrorists were hurt and weakened by the heavy blows. Next, the young men of Mousu beat the upper arms of the evil Drylaw ghost men. Agonizing cries reverberated across the entire village. The ghost men's heads were spared, but their backsides were solidly pounded by the wooden cudgels wielded by the young men. Eventually, the painful cries of the Drylaw reduced to low moans. Chief Waikata and his council elders emerged from their homes and approached the vanquished ghost men. None of the enemy contingent could walk or even crawl. Their legs, arms, and backsides were excruciatingly sore and swollen. The inflicted punishment yielded bruised muscles which would take many weeks to heal. The ghost men were imprisoned at Mousu village. The next morning, the curious villagers were able to see that the dreaded Drylaw were people like themselves. Fear of the ghost men began to wane. A message was sent by the Mousu village witch doctor via the Drylaw network to the ghost men's village in the jungle. Your ghost men have been captured and imprisoned. You must stop the extortionist activities immediately. Chief Waikata. A return message was prompt. 20 senior sorcerers will visit Mousu village tonight. Provide the food we have ordered, or your people will die under our most powerful spells. It was from the Drylaw leader known as Taivarua. Chief Waikata quaked and shivered internally in great fear. Don't worry, father, said a confident young Mosesa. Our group of young ghost fighters will beat them again and again, if necessary. The counteraction was repeated that night in Mousu. The 20 ghost men were committed to the Longhouse prison, immobilized and in great pain. Guards were posted to ensure appropriate confinement of the interlopers. At daybreak, an urgent message was sent to the police on the capital island by swift outrigger sailing canoe. Please come to our aid. Ghost men imprisoned at Mousu village. More conflict expected. Send contingent of strong policemen. Our canoe messengers will elaborate. Chief Waikata. News travels fast. While waiting for the police to arrive, Mosesa and his contingent of young Mu'utu men repeated the beating of ghost men in several other villages along the coast. Soon the dry law ghost men were weakened to the point of inactivity. The capital island police chief eventually arrived with a strong group of constables. He congratulated Chief Waikata and Mosesa for their brilliant anti-extortionist activities. The police commander informed the villagers that a ship was on its way to collect the prisoners for transfer to a distant, normally uninhabited prison island. The dry law ghost men's activities are well known to the authorities, he said. After a term of imprisonment, they will only be allowed to return to Taivarua Island if the Taivaruans approve. Otherwise, the ghost men and their families will be banished to an isolated, uninhabited island to rebuild their lives in a more constructive style.